the Mercury Theater, presented by the Columbia Broadcasting System and its affiliated stations. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Mercury Theater and star of these broadcasts, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orson Welles, broadcasting to you live this Halloween evening 2038 from Station 6 in the Olympus Mons settlement on Mars. As you know, repeated advisories to the U.S. federal government were made by Earth geologists 22 years ago to maintain good relations with Canada and Mexico, to assure that there will always be freely permeable boundaries between the U.S. and its neighbors in the event that immediate evacuation from the United States becomes urgent. Despite these advisories, a wall was erected in 2017. What's more, years of efforts made by the United Nations to remove the wall fell on deaf ears. The reasoning for taking it down seemed evident. Though it was thought that a disaster might not happen in our lifetimes, it was still known to be a possibility, based on the 16,000-year periodicity of the eruptions and the fact that the last one occurred roughly 16,000 years ago. Well, the unthinkable happened this past week when the horrifying event took place sooner rather than later. The cataclysmic explosion of the Yellowstone caldera, the Earth's biggest supervolcano. Immense lava flows continue to pour across Wyoming and are now beginning to enter Montana, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, Nebraska, and South Dakota. The tremendous heat from the liquid rock is causing houses to burst into flames as far as 10 miles from the edge of the flows. Fire continues to ravage the U.S. from Washington state to Florida, and ruptured sewer lines across the country continue to spread the dreaded K7 virus. Because of the pyroclastic ash that now covers 95% of U.S. roads, accessibility to medical facilities, food stores, and fueling stations is now virtually impossible, and almost all facilities have completely stopped operating. Canada has already gone beyond its realistic limits, allowing frenzied Americans entry into its southern provinces. The massive exodus is already taking its toll on the health and welfare of both Canadian nationals and the millions of American refugees who have somehow managed to trod across the border through the foot-thick blanket of volcanic ash that has made almost all U.S. roads impassable. The Canadian president issued a statement today to the American government that it cannot handle much more immigration into Quebec, Ontario, Alberta, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia, and that entry will eventually have to be limited to the frozen wilderness of the Northwest Territories by way of Alaska. I regret to have to say to our longtime neighbor, she said, that we may not be able to sustain our own citizens as well as yours if we allow any more people in. This dilemma could be averted if Mexico changes its policy. All Americans are being rigidly refused entry into Mexico. As God says in the Bible, the Mexican president said in a recent interview, An eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. You have treated us like cows in a fenced-in field. Now it is your turn. Every day, as many as 15,000 U.S. citizens attempting to jump the wall at the international boundary are being confronted by the Mexican Border Patrol and refused entry. Resisting compliance has repeatedly been met with deadly force. Makeshift refugee camps have sprung up along the 2,000-mile U.S.-Mexican border and stretch from the wall to as far as 100 miles north. Sadly, a monumental sign made out of rocks piled up in the Arizona desert that can be seen with Martian telescopes reads, "Please, dear God, let us in. We voted for Hillary." This is Orson Welles. Good night.